on WCIA 3 Plus. With your host, Stu Ellis. This is From the Farm.
And welcome to you all for another edition for From the Farm. We have a guest in the studio today who's a longtime friend. Been visiting with him for a number of years out in the South Farms. Connor Sible is with us, and Dr. Sible is a research assistant professor, colleague of the well-known and all-beloved Dr. Fred Below. And Connor and Fred have been a team that a lot of farmers have looked to for help for a number of years. We've got several things we want to talk to Connor about this morning, and or afternoon or evening, whenever it might be you might be watching this. But nevertheless, Connor, we welcome you, and you have a lot of different research projects that are going on for the coming 2026 research season, not growing season, but research season anyway. One of the things that you had suggested that might be a good topic for farmers to think about is residue management. And I saw an interesting picture offered by Sean Castile, soybean specialist over at Purdue, a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about residue in soybean fields and making sure that what comes out of the end of a combine the prior season isn't all piled up, because that really degrades the soybean yield right behind that combine that was picking corn. So residue is something really important to handle in a field.
It is, Stu, and I was at that same presentation, and as an extension specialist, it makes you very happy when somebody puts up the same concept and think, well, we're both thinking the same thing, so it must be relevant. And residue is something I hear a lot about these days, talking industry, farmers, academics, extension specialists. It seems to be on everyone's mind.
And it should everyone's mind, and everybody probably has something that they can do to improve what they're doing that will improve their soybean yield following that corn.
Completely. And it's not even just soybean, but thinking continuous corn or cover crop systems. This is why we like the idea of looking at residue and why it's on so many people's minds. It's for every system, no matter how you farm. There's some obvious examples where residue builds up. Reduced tillage systems like no-till or maybe strip till, that's going to build the residue over time. Cover crops, we're hearing a lot more about cover crops these days, a lot more implementing them, and another crop during the growing years, more residue. And a lot of folks, talk to me and they say, well, I still do 2-pass tillage system. I don't cover crop and I don't, I'm not no-till, so why should I think about residue on my farm? And I just throw the question back at them, have your yields gone up in the last 5 years, 10 years? And most often the answer is yes. Well, then you have residue building on your farm as well. Comes with higher yields. And on the extension side, if we're doing our job well, hopefully everybody's yields are going up. And so residue is for every acre. It just kind of depends on what situation you're coming at it from.
We had several 4 and 5 moldboard plows at home, and we buried it. And we thought that that's where we need to put the corn stalks, so they'll degrade, and soybeans following that, they'll get all the benefit of that nutrient.
Yeah, and people say, Connor, what's the best thing I can do to manage my residue? And the answer is till it under, exactly as you said. However, there's negative side effects we may see with that, especially if we do too much tillage. Is we're going to lose that soil via runoff and erosion. Maybe if we get those windstorms we've been seeing and it picks it across. So it's a balance. Everything's about balance. And if that mold board and deep tillage is the best way to go about residue management, are there other options? And that's back to, as you said, our research season, the questions we got into the field to ask and then hopefully answer to provide those solutions. But what could we do beyond tillage is a lot of the trials that we're looking at this year.
Okay, let's talk about a couple of those anyway. So people will think, hey, I want to see what's going to happen at the end of the season.
Yeah, well, and it does ultimately come down to yield. But when we think about where do we start, next year's residue management often starts with this year's harvest is a way to think about it. There's new sizing chopping corn heads or choppers that'll go out. Some people will just run, mower type systems. But if we can size the residue, break it up. The analogy I always like to use about residue management is it's treating it like a steak, right? We have a big juicy steak on our plate. Most of us don't just grab it and bite right into it, right? We take a knife and a fork and we cut it into pieces. Makes it easier to chew on, digest. It's the same concept for the microbes in our soils. Right? Why does tillage work so well for residue management? Because we're putting the residues in the soil where the microbes are. And it's those microbes, bacteria and fungi, that really do the work. And so the idea is, well, let's size it up a little bit, and maybe we don't need to till it as much if we can break it into pieces. So mechanical sizing is a first place to look. Then back to that steak analogy, some of us like a little salt and pepper, a little seasoning. We're looking at things like a little bit, not a lot, of nitrogen and sulfur as a way to help the microbes then digest that residue better, make it more palatable. The problem with residues, many of us know and talk about, is this pesky C to N ratio, right? The carbon to nitrogen ratio of residues is quite high. And so that means that residue ties up nitrogen if there's any left in our soils, but it also makes it slow to break down. And a little bit of nitrogen, and we're looking at sulfur, maybe helps the microbes go after it a little easier, give them a few tools to break it down. And then the last area, which you and I have talked about a couple times in the past few years, is this biological space to break down residues. It's the newest frontier, and a lot of questions on that. But we know the microbes in our soil break down residue. What if we put microbes on the residues directly via some sort of product application? So those are the alternative methods to tillage that we're looking at. I would say there's mechanical, there's the chemical via fertility, and then biological.
And within each one of those, I know you're going to have a wide number of variations, amount, where you're doing it physically, what you're doing chemically. And so you probably got several research fields that are going to be dedicated to residue management in various ways.
So many ways to look at it. Sometimes when we're talking really high yields, Stu, like 300 bushel corn, that puts a lot of residue out the back end of the combine. As you mentioned, that photo from Dr. Castile, what we're planting our beans into. Some questions are, should we do these practices and still do some form of tillage? Maybe it's not the mold bore, but some sort of vertical tillage with that. Is there an additive? So how do we compare that versus just no-till? How do these practices work no-till? And then we have to ask ourselves, what are we following that with? Is it corn on corn? Are we going to beans, which in our area, most folks would be following with soybean? And maybe we're going to plant a cover crop into that. And so there's so many different ways we can look at it. We're specifically, what we'll have this year is we'll look at tilled versus not tilled. All right, do these practices have a benefit with tillage? And we're doing a fall chisel with the spring cultivator, so not mold board, but still some tillage versus leaving it no-till. We're looking at that on corn. We'll look at first year, second year, third year corn on corn, but also corn soybean to make sure we cover both rotations. That's a lot on our traditional cropping acres, the corn soy rotation. We're also looking at things like cover crop management. This would be spring management. At termination, is there something we could add to that sprayer to help that cover crop residue break down? The biggest thing about fall management, Stu, is we do that in October. We have a lot of time for those residues to break down and digest by the time next year's crop goes to yield. Right. In a cover crop, we're terminating in the spring, and we've got a very short window to try and get that to break down to influence that season's yields.
So. Yeah, because there's an awful lot of, I shouldn't say an awful lot, there's an increasing number of farmers who are trying cover crops. We're still in the minimal percentage level yet, but at least some of those that have tried it may think, wait a minute, I'm just adding more residue here, and I'm getting into a problem. Am I defeating my purpose?
Exactly. We call that the residue penalty. And so we've got a lot of ideas looking at that. Big shout out to Illinois NREC, the Nutrient Resource Education Council. They're funding a lot of that work the last few years. And that penalty is the challenge. And when we've been doing that trial, we have seen with no management and a heavy cover crop residue, we can take yields backwards a little. But some of this chemical biological treatments we're looking at are actually overcoming that penalty. And that's getting exciting. And we're going into year 4 now. We're starting to see those tables turn on that penalty as well. So sometimes, Stu, it just takes time, a little perseverance, get through those first few years. That microbes, the system shock, they figure it out. We're starting to now see, as we go from year 3 into year 4, it's turning over into a positive yield bump and no longer a negative yield loss. So
you mentioned NREC and the Nutrient Research and Education Council provides some funding. Illinois Soybean Association provides some funding too. We're going to be talking about some of those when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back, and our guest today, Connor Sible, and Dr. Sible is part of University of Illinois agronomic research in the College of ACES, and we're talking about a lot of issues with soybeans. We've visited about how to take care of some residue management challenges. Farmers also need to be, or probably, talking to their soybean seed salesman to find out what the new varieties are this year. They won't be new to Connor. He may have researched on several of them in the past several years, but variety selection for yield is something that's pretty important, and depending upon what sort of agronomic practices you have on the farm.
Completely. I think, soybeans get a bad rap, or they don't get the attention they deserve. We think a lot of hybrid selection. I mean, we spend hours making sure we pick the right hybrid for the right acre, for how I'm managing it. And then we'll put any old bean in the next year just to make sure we get the rotation. Why do we rotate? Because it keeps the corn yields high, right? But we've seen some quite impressive soybean yields lately. If you go to the national yield contest, over 200 bushels.
Right.
But even here in the state of Illinois, we're seeing farmers come back more frequently, say, hey, I broke 100 bushels this year. Or my average the last few seasons has been 80, 85 bushels. That's a lot of potential. And then you start thinking, what if we really focused in and managed or selected varieties like we do corn? Are we going to start hearing those numbers a lot more frequently? But there's a lot of questions we don't know as much, because most folks today pick their varieties by maturity group and herbicide trait package, and we don't look much beyond that.
And so what research are you doing out on the South Farms this year that would help farmers answer those questions?
So the crop physiology lab, myself and Dr. Bilo, over the last decade have every year done some sort of what we call management yield potential trial, or MIP. MYP is our short acronym, where we test a lot of varieties to response in management. The last 3 years, we did planting date work. How do different varieties change in their yield response based on early, on time, or late planting? How do they respond uniquely to row spacing? Wide row, like a 30-inch, or we do 20-inch rows, be about what we would expect in a 15-inch. Foliar protection, fungicide with insecticide at R3. But what we've been missing in those studies is we do these treatments and we get the yields back, Stu, but then we can tell you these varieties liked this practice or that practice, but we haven't done as much focus on the why. What about that variety makes it different than the one next to it that didn't like fertility? Or the one next to it on the other side that loved foliar protection, but the others did not. And we're going to start with things like row spacing, planting population. But we know soybean varies. Some grow really tall, they're leggy. Right. Some grow very wide, or they're more prone to branching. Can we start phenotyping and characterizing those soybeans and say, if we know it branches, we know it should do well, in theory, come up with these hypotheses, and most of the time, Stu, we're wrong, but you got to test them in the field, right? But do the ones that branch belong in the wider row spacings? If you're on 30-inch spacing, should we maximize that system by finding one that branches? If we're on narrower rows, they're going to maybe grow a little taller inherently, and can we take advantage of that? A lot of types of questions there, just simply on branching and height. But we'll look at things as well as seed fill duration, right? Stay green effect. How long are they willing to fill those pods out? Maybe there's some willing to go longer than others, and that answers or tells us why certain practices like fungicide may or may not be better for one variety over another based on how long it naturally takes to fill the seed. So a lot of questions and what we'll be looking at.
How many different plots would you have for something to try to get answers to those questions? Are we talking about dozens and dozens?
Yes. So the other big thing with these variety trials, you need enough varieties to be confident, right? Not just one versus the other, but if we could have 5 that are classified as branching and 5 that are classified as non-branching, that gives us a better idea. So we typically use about 20 soybean varieties in our trials, and then we'll look at anywhere from 4 or 5 managements, so 80 to 100 plots there, and then we replicate at least 4, if not 6 times. So these trials can get quite big. They can be 400 to 600 plots sometimes. But that's what it takes to really get those answers, dive into it. And I should give a major shout out. You got me on today, but it's the grad students that really are out there day in, day out. It's amazing to work with such good students that are interested in it. And so, that's where we're going. We've got some new students coming in that'll help us with this project. That phenotyping, really understanding what about that bean is making it responsive to management A versus B is going to be a newer project beyond just the yields, and we'll have some new students coming in on that. So it takes a team.
Something that's kind of tangential. You're looking at the genetics in the soybean as to how they grow. Heard Carl Bradley, who's a plant pathologist at Kentucky, talking a couple days ago. He said he's noticed that in his research on red crown rot that everybody's getting concerned about, he said some soybeans are really susceptible to it and others are not. And he says there's some genetics in there, and the soybean seed companies know what those are. And right now they're trying to breed for for the soybean to not be susceptible to red crown rot. So when we look at what you are looking at for yield, and then finding a soybean variety that is going to be more resistant to red crown rot, we've got a whole nother issue thrown in the mix.
100%, Stu, and that's one of the biggest challenges is there are a lot of traits and things to look for in a variety selection. And if you have disease pressure, yes, we need to prioritize that over the right maybe stature for our row spacing. Pests will take yield away before they'll never add it. So we do want to make sure we cover pests, but as they better understand those new genetics, it's going to be that balance, the pros and cons to prioritizing disease package over the package that's suited maybe for the management practice. Hopefully we get both.
Okay. Do you ever see some of those diseases come up in your plots that will make you change to something or determine whether to do something or not do something?
Knock on wood, Stu, not yet. But it's coming. Dr. Boris Camilletti, our extension pathologist, he's really tackling this. So the good news is we've got the right experts on there to keep us informed. But sure enough, yes, if it ends up in our research sites, we will make sure we adapt to make sure the questions we look at on the yield side are not confounded by something like a disease that we weren't able to control.
Okay. And maybe Mr. Harrell from Virginia, who has 200 bushel plus beans, will take a look at some of the things that you're looking at and saying, hey, how can I hit the 225 mark? So
yeah.
We're talking with Connor Sible and from University of Illinois Plant Physiology, and we'll be back with more right after this. Don't go away. Hey, you're back with Connor Sible and Stu Ellis here. Connor is a research assistant professor at the University of Illinois and talking about soybeans today and what's going on out in his research plots with Dr. Fred Bilo. Soybeans are the primary topic, and there's a lot of folks that their grandfathers used to grow wheat and rotated with corn and beans. They got out of that practice several decades ago, but now wheat is kind of moving back in the area with a lot of soybean fields that are being double cropped with wheat. And we have an ace researcher here at the University of Illinois, Dr. Jessica Rutkowski, who is just doing tremendous things with wheat. And I don't know, she's adding 10, 15 bushels to the average of wheat yields in all of her plots every year. What can a soybean researcher such as yourself, Connor, do with Jessica to make sure that that farmer who wants to double crop gets a better opportunity and gets higher yields on both of those?
Stu, this is just a great way to kind of tie our entire conversation together. And 100% I agree. What Dr. Jessica Rutkowski is doing in the wheat breeding program has been phenomenal, and the gains she's and that team are producing year over year. And so as a soybean specialist, and especially in the double crop world, the higher wheat yields also comes back to more wheat straw, wheat residue, and how do we plant into that? How do we manage that? But if the wheat yields go up, that's more straw, and then more pressure or more stress when we put those beans in. And so trying to understand those dynamics. Because the one thing about where residue comes from in yield is we call the harvest index. So the amount of grain produced puts a certain amount of residue out the other end of the combine. And we haven't really changed that. So that means for every bushel we produce, we get more straw going out the back end. We're looking at residue management and double crop systems. Should we be planting more? Maybe there's variety selections. So a lot of questions there. And to give Jessica another shout out, she's going beyond the breeding, Stu, and looking at wheat agronomy, which we haven't done much wheat agronomy work here at Illinois. So great partnership that she's initiated. We're working together, looking at things like PGRs and fungicides on the wheat. And then we'll start countering, what we do management-wise to the wheat plots. Does that translate to the beans? Do they pick up the leftovers, so to speak?
Right.
So we got a little pipeline of projects we're going to start working on together, and excited to get the wheat management and agronomy, in addition to that double crop, back into the Illinois rotation and system.
That sounds like a special agronomy day for farmers over the winter sometime.
Oh, I bet. And I'm sure she'll mention it at the wheat tour that's coming up this spring as well. So the Southern Illinois Wheat Tour. I wouldn't be surprised if that topic and what she's initiated on the PGR and fungicide work also makes an appearance.
Well, if we had more of a market for wheat straw around here, we could take care of your residue management issue and part of her work. So what we need to do is get a company in here that wants a lot of wheat straw, and we've got it made.
Yep. But, there's goodies in that straw, right? Back to what the value of residue. There are some nutrients in there. So if we're not removing it from the fields, at least let's see if we can't get it to break down a little faster and then feed the soybean, right? Just keep the system running, circulating from there.
Some farmers are really getting into tissue testing. And that soybean leaf offers a pretty good opportunity to tell what's going on in that plant. And whether you send it off to a lab or you put one of those clamps down on it and takes a picture and sends it off on your phone, at least there are ways to get some information back on what that plant needs at a given time.
Yeah, and big thank you to the Illinois Soybean Association. They're helping us tackle that question on tissue testing. When you talk to those high-yield growers, they say it's the only way to get it done, right? You got to tissue test. It'll tell you where you're deficient, and you can correct it on a timely manner. And why it's really interesting on soybean is it has indeterminate growth. And that means while we're putting new leaves and flowers at the top of the plant, we're potting at the bottom of the plant. It's doing two different things at the same time. So nutritionally, the upper portion and the lower portion are also doing different things, right? We're moving nutrients to the top of the plant, probably from the soil uptake, but the bottom of the plant's remobilizing those nutrients out of the leaves into the pods. So it's brought a lot of questions. There's a standard tissue testing practice for soybean is the most recently mature trifoliate. We're kind of going back to confirm what exactly does that mean? Is that by color, by weight? Some folks take the second node down from the top, but others go to the third. So we're evaluating firstly is which one should we go to? But then we're just going all the way down the plant and say, well, let's track what's going on in the middle of the plant, at the bottom of the plant. Maybe we can make corrections there as well. So it's a lot of what we're doing is just reevaluating, do the current recommendations stand? Is that still the best way to do it? And then if we do say that there's a different way, what is it? Or do we need to just reevaluate our critical values as well, right? Those tissue tests come back with it says you're deficient or sufficient. Probably was back when we were doing 40, 50 bushel soybean. Do those critical values stay the same when we're talking 70, 80, 90 bushel beans? We expect they might be higher today. So a lot of questions. We're just kind of going out there, building our data set, taking a look at it, and then we'll build new recommendations from there. Or we'll say that the old method stands.
Part of the soybean checkoff paying for this.
Yes, yep. So those checkoff dollars through the Soybean Association come back into research. And the greatest thing about that project we're doing specifically, that came, not my idea. I wish it was. I really do. But from a farmer question in an audience at a field day. They put their hand up and said, I'm sampling the top of the plant, but I got pods at the bottom. Should I change something? And I said, I don't know, but let's go find out.
That's right. Great idea. And so Soybean Association and you and Dr. Fred Bilo get together, and suddenly you've got some answers. We really appreciate Connor Sible, Dr. Connor Sible, the University of Illinois Plant Physiology Lab, joining us today. I'm Stu Ellis.
From WCIA 3 Plus, with your host, Stu Ellis. This is From the Farm.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome to you. Welcome to our program today. I want to start off with a rather disconcerting statistic. Every year, somewhere an average of 24 farmers will probably die in a grain bin. Might only be 20 one year, might be 40 the next. But it's a statistic that is constantly steady, hasn't declined as you would think it would or it should, but it's been very steady. And grain bin fatalities are something that are just out there. We have educated farmers for many years about the problems. And we want to talk about that today because our special guest is Dr. Salah Issa. Salah is ag safety specialist with the University of Illinois, and he's been working in this area for a long time, not just in grain bins, but a lot of ag engineering and a lot of safety issues and things like that. And we're happy to have Salah today. Maybe he can explain why that statistic just doesn't change year after year.
Good morning, Stu. Thank you for having me on the air.
You bet.
That's been going steady since mid-2000s. Every year, somewhere between 20 to 40 grain entrapments. Around half of them tend to be fatal. And it's been steady. It hasn't dropped since then. And you'd expect with a lot of training, programs have been done, rescue methods have been done, that you would see a reduction in these incidents. But we don't. We do see a reduction in the severity. So I would say in the early 2010s period of time, around 60 to 70% of the incidents were fatal. Now we're closer to somewhere about 40 to 50% are fatal. And I credit all the great rescue efforts that are happening across the nation. In terms of the incidents themselves, I see a pattern, actually. You look at the site, it's almost like cyclical, where some years you have about 20 incidents, and then a few years later you have around 40. There has been unobserved claims that basically when you have late harvests or wet harvests, you tend to see an uptick in number of incidents the next year. So that's, and then on the reverse of that, when you have dry years, you tend to see less incidents the next year. So you see that where 2009 was considered a wet year and late harvest. 2010, we had a huge uptick in cases. Then 2012, we had the drought. And that year, the next year, we saw a reduction in number of cases.
So it makes sense for that because when the harvest is wet and the grain is wet and it congeals and it doesn't flow out of a grain bin very easy, and people go in and try to break it loose, and then things just all go to heck.
Yes, yeah, I would say that.
But there's a lot of education that has been spread around agriculture for years. Bill Fields over at Purdue really got a lot of this started, and that was several decades ago.
Yes.
Bob Aheron, who is your predecessor, he chimed right in and worked really hard on it. And there are probably others, ag engineers and safety specialists in agriculture, that have been really at the top of their game in trying to educate farmers. But it just still happens, and that's something that is difficult to really grasp.
I think if you really take a deeper look into the numbers, right? You look at Illinois. On average, we're having somewhere between 2 to 5 cases per year. So, for example, 2025, we had at least 3 to 4 entrapments and then 5 to 6 overall grain bin incidents. And then in 2024, we had also 3 to 4 entrapments and then an overall of 7 grain bin incidents. But you look at those numbers, 4 to 5, there's about 100 counties in Illinois, right? And around, let's say, a quarter of them are heavily corn-producing or soybean-producing counties. So, you're talking about just that. If you take an average of 5 incidents, right, you're talking about you're spreading it so thin along a huge geographical area that you tend to basically, unless you experience that grain entrapment, it's really a second thought. You're not really thinking about it because the vast majority of the times when you enter a grain bin, when you do your work inside a grain bin, you come out alive and nothing happens to you until obviously it doesn't and you get stuck there. But I think that's the issue with grain entrapments. It's a rare enough type of event that we don't really spend enough time on prevention. And we come out with a mentality, it's like, well, the grain gets stuck, I'll deal with it then.
I suppose if the grain bin companies would put a little sticker on the door that says, if you go through here, will you come out again? That might be rather morbid, but it will get attention. So
we do have stickers these days, right? But, I'll also think of grain bins, right? We've been building them for 60-something years, to say the least, our current format of grain bins. And some of them are really old and some of them are really new. And you have this very mixed environment all around. And for example, also in years where you're producing way more, your yields are amazing, you're going to, even if you have a grain bin that's decommissioned, you're going to bring it back and recommission it to fill the grain, right? Because that's what you're trying to do. You want to maximize your profits.
Yeah, the bins are necessary.
Yes,
but it's the way that we go in and we use them, and we've got to knock the grain loose, and maybe that technology needs to be worked on or something like that. Something to jiggle the bin and break it loose.
So that is something I've done a lot with. First, I want to say something that even if you do everything right, sometimes you have a bad year. So I work with a farmer, Guy Mills out of Nebraska, and he does everything. He checks his bins monthly. He has temperature probes, and in his grain bins, he's doing everything right. But even though with all his careful preparation, he had the year, I think it was around 2020, where due to unforeseen circumstances, grain ended up going bad and clumping in his grain bins. And for him, he had a decision to make. Do I enter the grain bin and risk my life? Or do I come up with other solutions? So what he went about, he said, you know what? There's compressed air. How about I push compressed air through the auger flighting, break those clumps, and extract my grain? Now, that wasn't an easy process because it's a repetition process, right? You push the compressed air, it will break the grain clumps in a localized environment. You extract the grain until you hit the next clump. But that's what he did because he valued, in a sense, safety. And we've tested actually here at Illinois using compressed air. I have to give precautions that you can hurt yourself using this, and you have to take all the safety precautions of using compressed air. But it is an existing solution that a farmer could cheaply adopt and implement if they have the time to remove their grain.
Do you know if any of the grain bin companies have created something like that, a tool that they could provide to farmers?
So that's a great question. I would start with saying that when we started our research project and we needed a air compressor, we went to a local grain elevator and they provided one to us free of charge. So they definitely do have the resources. However, an air compressor is only about $200 to $300 for rental per day. So that is also another solution there. Now, the reason I brought the story of Guy Mills is also because that he's a person who's done everything right, and still he had 1 year that the grain went bad. And I think this is something that every farmer should anticipate. And if you're anticipating that the grain can go bad, there's a lot of solutions you can implement. You can put some sort of steel structure to protect the outlet so that if there's a clump, it doesn't clog it, it just drops to the side. You can put, basically you can buy some solutions like clump breakers and other solutions that you can implement in your bin in advance. You can even as simple as bringing a pipe that you kind of stick to your the grain bin, the grain outlet door, that you can press in and out just to break the clumps nearby. There's just a lot of solutions. This is something I detailed on one of our websites. There's just a lot of solutions that a farmer can take ahead of time in anticipation that one day his grain might go bad.
Why are we talking about this issue? We're going to come back and tell you exactly why we're talking about this issue in just a moment. Stay with us. We welcome you back to our program today about grain bin safety, but the whole focus of this is something coming up that's starting on March 30th. And it's Grain Bin Safety Week for at least the quick and easy title of it. But Salah, you've got a special name for this week that begins March 30th.
Yes, we call it Stand Up for Grain Safety Week.
And why do you have it? Why does it say Stand Up?
So this is a program that it's been in existence for, I would say, give or take about 10 years, maybe 15 years now. It's actually a partnership between OSHA, between Grain Safety Handling Coalition, partnership between the National Grain Feed Association and JEEPS, which is Grain Elevator and Processing Society. So this partnership they come together every year and they do a dedicated week-long event on grain safety, hence why we call it Stand Up for Grain Safety.
And at the University of Illinois, you've got a lot of things that people can participate in, either physically or virtually.
Yes. So the Stand Up for Grain Safety Week is a week-long thing, and we tend to, on the day one of it, we tend to do in person, where we want to demonstrate different safety techniques or issues. And that tends to move around. And this year, we're very lucky to have it in Illinois at our Feed Technology Center, which we built it recently, in the last 3 to 5 years. And we're very excited for this. So at this event, we have wonderful experts on fire, on electricity, on ladders, and on grain. Kind of like all these secondary issues that you have issues in a grain elevator or while handling grain. So we have David Newcomb. He's going to show us grain dust explosion in action and tell you what the risk associated with that. We're going to have Daniel Gaither, who is our director of safety in our College of Agriculture. He will be presenting ladder safety, right? So I'm sure everybody has their own rickety ladders that they've inherited over time. He's going to tell you why it's not such a good idea to still be using these ladders. Then we have Steve Hancock. He will be presenting on electrical safety, and he'll be doing 2 demonstrations. One, he's just going to focus on day-to-day, your electrical cords, your extensions, cables, and he's just going to talk about where can you find yourself in a situation where you can get electrocuted. And then, and this is a particular importance to our grain handling, anybody who handles grain, he's going to give a 1-hour demonstration on live lines. So imagine, those power lines that are coming directly to the house from the street, he is going to take you through it step by step and show you what are the risks and those safety tools involved, what are they actually doing? And you'll realize that the vast majority of them are really meant to protect the lines and not you yourself personally. And then we will have John Lee, who works for the Illinois Grain Feed Association. He is going to give a demonstration on machine guarding, and all of these topics are relevant to any modern or current grain handling and feed facility. So we'll be doing that from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And you'll also get to have a tour of our feed center.
So there's a lot of things there that you just went through, and farmers are going to say to themselves, "Yeah, I know that," but if they saw what the demonstrations might be, they might say, "Whoa, I didn't know that."
Yeah.
And so, even though we all think we know about safety, we may know a small percentage of it.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to safety, a lot of times it comes down to, we have the assumption, if this happens to me, I'll be able to avoid the risk or the hazard. But in reality, it's fast. The moment that a ladder is waffling and you fall down, it's less than half a second. There's nothing you can do once you start falling. It's no different than being in a car and not wearing your seatbelt and imagining that if you see another car coming to hit you, you can just put your seatbelt just in time. You can't. Similarly, with all of these cases, whether it's electricity, machine guarding, grain dust explosions, or ladders, you don't have time to react. And that's why we do these demonstrations, to show you how fast they actually occur.
I know when I've been shocked by electricity, there's not time to avoid it.
Exactly.
We're going to be back with more with Dr. Salah Issa of the University of Illinois Ag Engineering Department is our safety specialist, and we'll get more information to you about Stand Up for Grain Safety, the week that starts March 30th. Stay with us. Grain Safety Week is coming up beginning on March 30th, and a lot of activities on that week. Now, you may be watching this program afterwards, but if you were watching it before, Dr. Salah Issa of the University of Illinois Ag Engineering staff is here, and What sort of a schedule do you have for that week, and what are the events, and are there charges or registrations or anything for the folks who want to attend if you are watching it before March 30th?
Yeah, so again, this is a week-long program. The whole week is available online. In addition to that Monday, we'll be having it in person as well. And just a shout out to Champaign Farm Bureau. They are covering lunch, and that's why we have a registration where you have to register by March 23rd so that we can count how many heads to provide for lunch. In addition, for the program itself, there's a lot of cool sessions that are happening throughout the week. Sessions are covering ergonomics, critical safety issues, effective training, design flaws, and all of this will be online. You can go to standupforgrainsafety.org, and you can find these sessions. Also, after the events are over, these shows or presentations will get all recorded, and they'll be online for everybody who can visit them.
Okay. And there's no charge for this?
There is no charges for anything. That's our goal, is to bring you in and hopefully benefit and learn something new about safety and keep yourself and your family safe.
So if you do learn something that prevents a fatality, you can say this was beneficial.
Yes, that is my dream. I actually studied under Dr. Billfield, and that's all I wanted, that basically the work I do saves a life. If it does, I have done my mission on earth in a sense.
Well, very good. My goal was to help farmers make more money and stay out of jail, and if I have done that, why, I'm happy. And if you've saved a life, and it seems like we're kidding here, but we're very serious.
Yeah.
It's having lost a life on the farm is critical. Now, the programs that can be visited out at the feed mill, the Fig Technology Center, south of the South Campus, are they going to be recorded and will be online? Okay.
They will be recorded as well, except for the live line demo. We will not be able to record that given the length of that demonstration. But everything else, we'll be recording it as well. But my hope is, again, we'd love to have you in person. You'll get to explore the feed mill, and then you will get to see and watch these demos and interact with these professionals directly.
And then for the folks, the other ones during the week, they will be online.
Yes.
And where are they found? What is the address, the web address they're found at?
So the easiest way is just you can search up for standupforgrainsafety.org. That's where they all are. And then our registration process for the in-person one is slightly different because, again, we're trying to provide meals and all of that. So that is the website. I believe it's popping up there. That's go.illinois.edu/safety kickoff. That will take you to the registration for the in-person.
Okay. Now, you indicated that there's a lot of national organizations, state and national organizations, participating in Stand Up for Grain Safety. Do they have other programs going on that people could tune into online?
So this is why we do the Stand Up for Grain Safety. Each one of these national organizations is contributing either experts or moderators in hosting this week-long event.
Okay, so it's something that really isn't just for Central Illinois farmers. It's for farmers in the Corn Belt that have been in and out of grain bins and are still with us to go in and out of grain bins.
It is nationwide, and we tend to get somewhere between 200 to 500 attendees that are joining us live every year. So it generally is well received.
So that's something that we certainly hope we can educate some people, because as we started out the the program today, indicating some data that was very disturbing about how many people lose their lives in grain bins. The whole goal is to make sure that we can get down to zero.
It very much is so. You know, grain entrapments are almost 100% preventable. There shouldn't be any grain entrapment. The only exception you'd say if a grain bin collapses well next to you. That very rarely happens. So, yeah, we want to get those numbers to zero, and it should be feasible.
We'll certainly try to do that. Salah, you've got some other, a lot of other safety engineering things that go on during your days here at the university too.
Yeah, so in addition to grain safety, I am very interested in autonomy safety. So I'm looking at all these new cool gadgets or machines that are coming into the farms, autonomous robots, autonomous tractors. And I'm trying to understand, well, where's the safety risk here? How can we actually make sure that these machines are reducing the fatality rates that we see in agriculture? And again, agriculture is considered the most hazardous industry in the U.S. And so these are some very relevant questions and some of the work that I'm doing.
With all sorts of robotics, why you don't want to do something that's going to get in the robot's way because he may not realize what he's supposed to do.
That's definitely true. And it goes beyond just really safety there with all these robots and autonomous work. There's also questions on the rural community as a whole in terms of workforce development. Like, how can we make sure that this introduction of autonomy doesn't become another drain on the rural community? That's something that I'm not necessarily the expert there, but I'm working very closely with others who are, and we're trying to understand that as well.
Sounds like some fascinating topics. Will you come back sometime?
Anytime. I'd love to.
We would look forward to that. Dr. Salah Issa of the University of Illinois Ag Engineering Department. Thanks for watching today.
Thank you for having me.